Hi everyone, and welcome back to our channel. If you love emotional stories that inspire, heal, and empower, you're in the right place. Before we dive into today's touching story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story that speaks to your heart. Now let's begin. It was a chilly autumn day in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The crisp air seeped through every layer, making Layla Morgan clutch her gray scarf tighter as she hurried across the campus square of Carnegie Mellon University, where she was a sophomore majoring in graphic design. With her round figure and bare face, Layla always tried to avoid the gazes of others. She wasn't unattractive, just not beautiful by society's standards. For 2 years of college, she had been the quiet shadow in her class. No close friends, no parties, no hangouts. Layla chose to live quietly, keeping to her own world, a place where she could truly be herself through her designs and the colorful images she didn't dare show outside. One quiet night, as she sat at her dorm room, she received a message on an art chat app called Art Realm, a place where users shared their artwork, design inspiration, and sometimes chatted under nicknames. Eli_sketches. Hey, I just saw your digital piece, the one with the rainy Pittsburgh street. Absolutely beautiful. You've got talent. Layla frowned. It was rare for anyone to message her directly on this app, especially a stranger. Layla_designs. Thank you. That one's special to me. Eli_sketches. It shows. Rainy, quiet, kind of melancholic, but hopeful. Just honest. You must be an old soul. A gentle, respectful message. No mention of looks. Layla smiled a little. Over the next few days, she and Eli began chatting more and more. He said he studied at another school near Harrisburg, also majoring in art, and he had a warm, sincere way of talking. He always asked Layla about her feelings when she drew, about her thoughts on the world. No one had ever talked to her like that before. Layla started to look forward to those online moments, to Eli's messages. Some nights, they chatted until midnight about their fear of loneliness, their dreams of becoming independent artists, and living authentically in a world full of pressure. One Sunday evening, Eli messaged, "I feel like I've known you for a long time, Layla. It's kind of crazy. Maybe we should meet in person." Layla froze. Part of her heart leaped with hope. Another part whispered, "What if he sees you in real life and is disappointed?" She hesitantly replied, "You do know I'm not exactly the model type, right? Eli, I don't care about any of that. You're real. That's what matters." Her heart pounded. It sounded like something from a fairy tale. Finally, Layla agreed. They planned to meet at a popular downtown coffee shop, Madeline's Beans and Brews. She chose her favorite burgundy dress, brushed her hair neatly, and even put on a bit of lipstick, something she hardly ever did. She arrived early, sitting by the window, her heart thudding in her chest. Every time the door opened, she looked up, hoping, but no one matched the description. Brown hair, tall, round glasses, navy hoodie. 15 minutes. 30. An hour. She started to worry. The last message from Eli was, "I'm almost there." And then the door swung open. A girl walked in, not Eli, but Layla recognized her. Chloe Matthews, a classmate from her department. Chloe was popular, beautiful, sharp-tongued, always surrounded by the hottest group in class. She'd never spoken to Layla, except for that one time she'd sneered about the donut in her lunch. Chloe headed straight for Layla's table. "Hey, Layla," she smirked. "Surprise." Layla stared, confused. "Chloe, what are you doing here?" Chloe pulled out her phone, opened Art Realm, and showed it to Layla. Username, Elia la Vivacheches. Layla's face drained of color. "You really thought a guy like Eli existed?" Chloe scoffed. "You really thought anyone would fall for a fat, pathetic art geek like you?" A click echoed as Chloe raised her phone, live streaming the moment. "Look, everyone. The big reveal, catfished by her boyfriend. Look at her face," she laughed into the camera. The cafe went quiet, people starting to look over. A few snickers rippled through the room. Layla sat frozen. Her heart felt like it was being crushed in someone's fist. Every hope, every dream, every feeling collapsed like a hailstorm. But at that very moment, a voice spoke up from behind the bar. "That's enough. A young man in a cafe uniform strode over and stood between Layla and Chloe. He had bright eyes, a rough jawline, and a look of fierce determination. "Delete that video now," he said to Chloe, "or I'll get the manager." Chloe hesitated, caught off guard. "Who the hell are you?" she spat. "I'm her boyfriend," he replied, turning to gently take Layla's hand. "And I won't let anyone hurt the person I love." The atmosphere inside Madeline's beans and Brews froze. Layla sat still, her face flushed, not from anger, but humiliation. She could feel her whole body trembling. But the hand of the young man, standing beside her, remained firmly wrapped around hers. There was no mockery in his eyes, no pity, only protection, steady and unwavering. Chloe sneered. "Boyfriend? Really? Look at her. You're telling me someone actually chose to date that?" Jake didn't let go of Layla's hand. His voice was calm and steady, a bit hoarse but warm. "You don't know who she is, but I do, and I'm proud to have someone like her by my side." He turned to Layla and looked at her gently. "Don't let their garbage words get to you." That one word, "you," echoed in Layla's mind like a bell. No one had ever spoken to her like that, with such gentleness and certainty. The cafe manager, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and brisk steps, arrived quickly after a staff member whispered in her ear. She stepped up to Chloe, stern. "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We do not tolerate filming, harassment, or any form of public humiliation in our establishment." "You can't make me." "I absolutely can. It's written clearly in our policy. If you refuse, I'll call the police." Chloe stared, flustered, then turned on her heels and stormed out, not without shooting Layla a venomous glare. Once the commotion died down, Jake turned back to Layla, still trembling, still stunned. He spoke softly. "Would you like to go outside for a bit? My shift ends soon. We could take a walk if you want." Layla looked up at him clearly for the first time. Jake wasn't some picture-perfect guy from a romance movie. He wasn't tall, his curly brown hair was slightly unkempt, and there was a faint ink stain on the sleeve of his cafe uniform. But his eyes, they were full of something she hadn't seen in a long time. Kindness. "Okay," she murmured. About half an hour later, they left the cafe together. Jake had changed into a dark hoodie, while Layla walked beside him in silence, still holding herself together. They strolled along the cobblestone path of Skinley Park. Golden leaves fluttered around them as a breeze swept through the thinning trees. It was the kind of melancholy autumn scene Layla used to draw, but today, she didn't feel like she was part of a sad story anymore. Jake was the first to speak. "I'm really sorry for what happened back there. That was awful." It's not your fault," Layla shook her head. "I was stupid to believe." "Believing in genuine feelings isn't stupid," Jake interrupted gently. "There are just people out there who don't deserve them." Layla felt a lump in her throat. For a moment, she wanted to pour everything out about growing up ashamed of her body, being mocked behind her back in class, and never daring to believe she could be loved. Instead, she simply asked, "Why did you do it?" "You don't even know me." Jake chuckled lightly. "I've been working at that cafe for nearly a year. I noticed you the first time you came in, always by the window, sketching in your notebook, smiling to yourself sometimes. I didn't want to intrude, but today, I just couldn't stay quiet." Layla's eyes widened. "You noticed me?" Jake nodded. "You always looked like you carried so much on your shoulders. And I thought, if someone had stood up for me when I needed it most, I would have wanted to do the same for someone else." They stood in silence for a while. The street lights began to flicker on, casting a soft golden hue over the sidewalk. Layla turned to look at Jake. Warmth crept into her heart, pushing out the shame. For the first time in years, she didn't feel embarrassed by her body. She just felt grateful that someone had truly seen her, not for what she looked like, but for who she was. "Thank you, Jake." He smiled. "So, if I asked you to grab a hot chocolate with me this weekend, would you say yes?" Layla chuckled, her voice still shaking, but her eyes now sparkling like the sunrise after a storm. "I'd say yes." That weekend, Layla returned to Madeline's Beans and Brews, but this time she didn't walk in with trembling steps or a heavy heart. Instead, she carried with her a strange flutter of excitement, as if her life was about to turn a new page. Jake was already waiting at the farthest corner of the cafe, where warm yellow lights bathed the polished oak table in a cozy glow. He wore a simple denim jacket, holding 2 cups of hot chocolate. One was topped with whipped cream and cookie crumbs, just the way she liked it, something she had mentioned briefly before. Layla sat down with a gentle nod. She still wasn't used to someone treating her this kindly. Not out of pity, not out of obligation, but simply because they wanted to. Jake looked at her like he was still trying to believe she was real, a quiet, thoughtful girl with more depth than he could imagine. "You feeling any better?" he asked, his voice soft. Layla nodded. "Still hurts, but not because of what happened. More because I let myself believe in something that was never real." Jake didn't interrupt. He knew sometimes silence was the best way to listen. "Jake," she said after a moment, taking a deep breath, "there's something I want to tell you. About me." He raised his eyebrows. Layla reached into her bag and pulled out a thin, gold-embossed card, placing it gently on the table. Jake looked down, reading the words. "Morgan Group, Executive Board Member, Layla A. Morgan." He looked up, surprised. Morgan, like Morgan's Brew? That coffee chain with over 200 locations in the state. Layla nodded, her eyes a little uneasy. "I'm the only daughter of Richard Morgan." Jake let out a soft chuckle of disbelief. "And you are sitting here drinking hot chocolate with a regular barista like me?" Layla smiled faintly. "You're not just some barista. You're the first person who ever stood up for me without knowing who I was. That means more than any business card." Jake looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. "I honestly don't know what to say. I always thought stuff like this only happened in movies. Actually, I don't like people knowing," she said. "I'm tired of being approached for the wrong reasons. At school, I use my real name, but no one notices because I keep a low profile. I just want to be seen as a regular person. Kind of like how you work here," she added, her voice softer. "And it feels like you're hiding something too." Jake let out a dry laugh, scratching the back of his neck. "Nothing as big as your story. I used to study interior design in Philly. But when my mom got sick, I dropped out, moved back to Pittsburgh to care for her. Work during the day, draw at night. Nothing fancy." Layla stayed quiet for a moment. There was a sudden sense of connection between them, not just because of their words, but because of the way they carried their scars, quietly, without bitterness. "Do you have a dream?" she asked. Jake looked out the window, where golden leaves fluttered in the fall breeze. "I want to open a small cafe someday. Kind of like a creative hub, a place for young people to drink coffee, draw, perform, make art. A space where no one gets judged for how they look or where they come from." Layla's hands tightened gently around her cup. That dream, it sounded so much like something she'd once envisioned but never dared to say aloud. "Maybe I could help," she said softly. Jake frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Layla met his eyes, her gaze steady. "I don't want to be some rich girl in an ivory tower. I have dreams too, and I think we could build something together. Not because I have money, but because I believe in you." Jake looked at her in silence. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. Not because of opportunity, not because of status, but because for the first time in a long time, someone believed in him without asking for anything in return. "So, where do we start?" he asked. Layla smiled, her eyes bright like sunshine after a long winter. "Maybe with a proper date," she teased, making them both laugh. Layla thought the storm had passed. She thought she could finally breathe again, that the humiliation at the cafe was behind her. But in the age of the internet, where cruelty spreads faster than kindness, the scars of that day had only begun to surface. Just a few days after her second date with Jake, a video began circulating on the Carnegie Mellon University student forums. Then it hit Reddit, then TikTok, and soon, dozens of clickbait news sites picked it up. Title: "Rich Fat Girl Got Catfished and Protected by a Waiter. Real Drama at Pittsburgh Cafe." The footage captured the exact moment Chloe humiliated Layla in front of the entire cafe. Edited cleverly, the video painted a narrative. Layla, awkward and naive. Chloe, sharp and mocking. Jake, the mysterious, heroic waiter. To the internet, it looked like a poorly scripted soap opera. Some comments were savage. She probably paid that guy to pretend to be her boyfriend. You call this love? Please. It's a money grab. Another rich kid with a drama kink. Pathetic. Though many stood up for Layla, calling out the obvious bullying and commending Jake's courage, the negative comments still flooded him like a tidal wave. Each notification on her phone felt like another stab to the heart. Layla tried to ignore it. She stopped logging on his social media, kept her headphones in during class, and walked faster through the hallways. But whispers trailed behind her. Some students giggled as she passed. Someone even slipped a printed meme into her locker, mocking her weight and Jake's fake chivalry. One chilly evening, Jake knocked on the door of Layla's small apartment near campus. He wasn't in his usual cafe uniform, but in a dark hoodie, his head low, eyes heavy. Layla opened the door, her eyes red-rimmed. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. Jake nodded. He stepped inside and sat quietly near the window. For a moment, neither spoke. "My old friends from Philly sent it to me," he finally said. "They asked if I'm gold-digging now." Layla clenched her fists. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to drag you into this." Jake looked up. "Do you really think I did this for attention?" Tears welled up in her eyes. I am scared. I thought things were getting better, but now I feel like I ruined everything." Jake stood and took her hands gently. "Layla, if you honestly believe I care about your money, then tell me now and I'll leave. But if you know deep down that I stood up for you because I meant every word I said, then don't let these people break what we've built." She looked into his eyes. All she saw was honesty, the same steady, unwavering look that calmed her in the cafe. Slowly, she nodded. "I'm not as strong as you think. I want to be, but now I just want to disappear." Jake pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "Then lean on me. I'll be strong for both of us." The next day, Layla was summoned to the dean's office. Waiting inside was someone she didn't expect, Mr. Steve Patterson, her father's old friend and a respected advisor at the university. "Layla, I heard about the video," he said gently, "and I also know Chloe is one of our students. With the evidence you brought, the chats, the audio, she could be suspended." Layla sat silently, the USB drive clutched in her hand. She didn't want revenge. She just wanted peace. "You have the power to take action," Mr. Patterson said. "But what do you want?" Layla thought for a long time. "I don't want her expelled. I just want her to understand that words can kill without a single blade." He nodded with a look of deep respect. "That's a wise choice. I'll handle the rest." That evening, Jake took Layla to an abandoned warehouse near the Monongahela River. As he opened the creaky door, Layla gasped. Inside, she saw wooden boards, art easels, cans of paint, and even a dusty espresso machine tucked in the corner. "I've been renting this place," Jake said, "fixing it up bit by bit. It's not fancy, but it's a start." "You mean this is your cafe studio dream?" Jake nodded. "I want to call it a haven, a safe space, where no one is judged, where dreams are welcome." Layla felt tears forming again, but this time they were warm. She looked around at the half-painted walls, the smell of old wood and paint, and she saw possibility. "I want to be your co-founder," she said, smiling through her tears. Jake took her hands in his. "Then let's begin." In the months that followed, the Haven became a quiet revolution. Students came to draw, poets came to read, musicians played under fairy lights. Layla no longer hid who she was. She used her resources, not to boast, but to uplift. The story of the bullied heiress and the kind-hearted barista spread far and wide. But this time, the narrative changed. People now told it as a story of healing, of courage, of transformation. And as Layla stood behind the counter one evening, watching Jake show a shy teenager how to mix paint, she knew this was what real wealth looked like. The Haven had been open for nearly 3 months. The old warehouse by the Monongahela River had been transformed into a gathering place for lost souls. Unknown artists, quiet students, struggling workers, and anyone who felt out of place in the world. There was no fixed price for coffee. People paid what they could. Some came just to sit quietly, to look at someone's half-finished painting, or simply to exist in a space where no one judged them. Layla sat at her work table, sketching a portrait in pencil. The image on the paper was of Jake, his face slightly turned contemplative, with eyes warm like a late autumn breeze. The drawing wasn't perfect, but it was real, just like their love. Jake walked over, carrying 2 cups of cappuccino, placing them gently on the table. I made yours just the way you like it. The perfect foam ratio. Layla smiled. You're a fast learner. I have to be, Jake replied with a grin. I can't risk you running away. She looked down, cheeks slightly flushed. Between them, there weren't grand declarations or dramatic promises. Their love was quiet but undeniable, present in every small gesture. That evening, an unexpected email arrived from a famous address. The Heather Gaines Show, one of the most popular morning talk shows in America. Subject of the next episode, Love or Lies. When an heiress meets a waiter. Layla read each line carefully. The show wanted to invite her and Jake to appear for a live taping. The teaser highlighted their controversial romance that captivated millions online. They promised a fair conversation, but the tone of the email hinted at sensationalism. Jake read it and frowned. They don't care about our story, Layla. They just want ratings. Layla nodded. But if we say no, they'll still tell it, just not the truth. If we don't speak for ourselves, someone else will speak for us. Jake looked at her. He had always seen her as strong, but today, her eyes burned with something deeper, a woman no longer willing to hide. So, you want to go? Layla nodded. I want to speak, not to defend myself, but so others like me, who've been shamed or laughed at, know they can stand tall too. Jake squeezed her hand. If you're going, I'm going with you. The taping took place in New York. Layla wore a square-necked blue dress, her hair pulled into a neat bun, her face lightly made up but still her. Jake kept it simple. White shirt, dark jeans, and that sincere smile. On stage, Heather Gaines, renowned host, held the mic with her signature poise. We're here today with Layla Morgan, heiress to a food and beverage empire, and Jake Thompson, the waiter once dubbed the romantic hero. Their love story sparked huge debates. Today, we hear it from them directly. Applause. The cameras panned to Layla. Her heart raced, but she didn't lower her head. Layla, Heather began, many believe Jake approached you for your money. What's your response? Layla smiled calmly. Jake stood up for me when I was a nobody, mocked, humiliated, completely alone. If he wanted money, he wouldn't have done that before even knowing who I was. Heather turned to Jake. Jake, do you feel pressure dating someone famous, wealthy, and constantly under public scrutiny? Jake exhaled and looked into Layla's eyes. I feel lucky and angry, not at her, but at a world that thinks love only has value when both people are equal by money or looks. Real love doesn't care about bank accounts or body types. It only asks for honesty. The studio fell silent for a moment, then erupted in applause, this time warm and genuine. Heather smiled, as if surprised she couldn't find any cracks to exploit. If you could do it all over again, would you still hide your identity? Layla responded thoughtfully, no, because I've learned that only by living truthfully can you find someone who sees the real you. After the show aired nationwide, public perception shifted. Instead of judgment, admiration. The Haven drew more support. Nonprofits began collaborating. Layla received letters from strangers, girls who'd been bullied, shamed, overlooked. Girls who once thought they'd never be loved. One evening, as Jake was sweeping the cafe floor, Layla brought him a letter. You need to read this. Jake opened it. A handwritten note, messy but heartfelt. I've always been invisible. Every time I got mocked for my weight, I thought maybe I wasn't meant to be here. But then I watched your story. I cried, and I started drawing again. Thank you for being a light for someone like me. Elise, 17, from Ohio. Jake folded the letter and held it tight. I used to think I was just a waiter, but now I know I could do more. Layla embraced him, and you have, not just for me, but for so many others. That night, they sat together on the roof of the Haven. Pittsburgh shimmered beneath them, the city lights flickering like stars. The wind was cool, gentle. Jake, Layla whispered, if one day everything falls apart and I lose it all, would you still be here? Jake didn't hesitate. If everything disappeared, I'd still sit here with you on a rooftop. Because I love you, not for what you have, but for who you are." Layla smiled, eyes glistening. In a world full of judgment and noise, she had found something worth holding on to. A love strong enough to outshine every shadow. 8 months after the infamous cafe video went viral, Layla Morgan stood backstage at TEDx Pittsburgh, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the remote control for her slideshow. The auditorium in front of her held over 300 people. Beyond the live stream screen were thousands of eyes, some curious, some skeptical, and some that had once laughed at her. But among them were also people just like she used to be. Those who had once hidden in corners, cried quietly after being called fat, weird, or unworthy. Jake stood just off stage, never taking his eyes off her for even a second. "You don't have to say anything perfect," he said gently. "Just be yourself. That's always been more than enough." Layla nodded, her lips pressed into a determined line. When the host announced, "Please welcome Layla Morgan, founder of The Haven, artist and community advocate," the crowd burst into applause. She stepped forward. Her plum-colored dress hugged her figure modestly, her face lightly made up, keeping her natural features intact. On the screen behind her appeared an image, a girl sitting alone before a cold cup of coffee, staring out the window, a sketch Layla once drew of herself at night. She was humiliated. She took a deep breath and began. "A year ago, I was the fat girl who got trolled at a cafe. That's what the internet called me. And back then, I called myself a fool for believing in online love. But what I didn't know was that day would be the beginning of everything." The room went completely still. "I used to think I had to hide who I was. Hide my body, hide my identity, hide my heart, because the world taught me that someone like me didn't deserve to be seen. But one person stepped forward, stood in front of me when the world laughed. He said, 'I'm her boyfriend.' And even if he was pretending to protect me, that sentence saved my heart from breaking." Layla paused, her eyes distant but bright. "His name is Jake, a regular barista with an extraordinary heart." There was a murmur in the room. Heads nodded. Faces softened. To Jake, I wasn't the daughter of billionaire Richard Morgan. I was just Layla, a girl who liked sketching rainy Pittsburgh streets, drinking sugar-free cappuccinos, and once hated herself every time she looked in the mirror. She clicked the remote. The screen behind her lit up with photos of the Haven, the cafe art studio they had built together. Warm lighting, vibrant artwork, joyful faces. No one looked alike, yet everyone belonged. We created the Haven for those who'd been judged, left out, or laughed at. At the Haven, you don't have to be beautiful to be seen. You don't have to be talented to be respected. You just have to be real. And that's enough." She paused, then pulled a folded letter from her pocket, a handwritten note from Elise, the teenager who once nearly took her own life after being bullied for her body. She wrote to me, "You don't need a princess dress, Layla, but you're a queen to me." I cried when I read that, because I realized every insult, every scar, every shame I'd endured, it wasn't meaningless. It became the bridge that led me to someone who needed me. Layla looked down at the audience. An older woman dabbed her eyes. A young man nodded solemnly. A small girl clutched her sketchbook to her chest. We live in a society that teaches us we must be perfect to have value. But I'm standing here today to tell you, you already have value, the moment you choose to live truthfully. She lifted her head, her voice growing stronger. "I used to be the girl who was humiliated at a cafe. But today I am the one telling that story, not to complain, but to remind you, your heart is strong enough. And once you realize that, no one can steal your light." Applause erupted. Then came another, and another, until the entire auditorium rose to its feet. Not because she was a billionaire's daughter, but because she had risen from pain and turned it into a light that warmed others. That night, Layla returned to the Haven. Jake waited for her on the rooftop terrace where they often sat in silence to rest their minds. "I watched the live stream," Jake said as she sat beside him. "I don't know if I'm prouder of you as an artist or as a warrior." Layla leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm just a girl who was once broken, but refused to let it destroy her." Jake placed his hand over hers. "And now you're healing others." They sat quietly, the only sound being the soft wind and the golden glow of city lights below. Jake, Layla whispered, if one day everything falls apart and I lose everything, would you still be here? Jake didn't hesitate. If everything disappears, I'll still be sitting right here with you on a rooftop. Because I love you. Not for what you have, but for who you are. Layla laughed through tears of happiness. 1 year later, the Haven had expanded to 3 locations across Pennsylvania. Layla published a book titled Because I Don't Need to Be Perfect, translated into 11 languages. Jake ran a vocational art program for teens who had been bullied. Chloe, after a semester-long suspension, sent a handwritten apology letter to Layla. She didn't fully forgive her, but she didn't hold a grudge either. As Layla once said, I don't take revenge. I simply rise, higher, stronger, and brighter. Layla Morgan, once a girl afraid of being seen, became a beacon for thousands who had lost their way. And her story is living proof that not every insult breaks you. Not every humiliation defeats you. And sometimes, all it takes is one person to stand up for you at the right moment, to remind you that you are worthy of love, of life, and of shining in your own light.